Hey there cats and kitties, I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video I want to talk about the anime series Solty Rei, which just as of the time this recording came out in the last couple of weeks in this save pack format, allowing me to revisit this just phenomenal series. I'd literally forgotten how much I loved it. I'd owned it when it came out, several years back now in the full DVD box set, and I actually had to part with it to make ends meet, and so this coming out was just pitch perfect because I was desperate to actually revisit this series and let my sister watch it along with me and see just how awesome it was. It's a very emotional story at its core, and it comes in the form of being sort of very reminiscent to such series as Ghost in the Shell and Cowboy Bebop, two of my all-time favorite anime series. They're always vying for my #1 favorite and everything like that, and sort of put under the microscope in the course of this series is questioning the familial. What does family mean? And very much as we find in life time and time again, sometimes people who are, befriended to us end up meaning a little bit more than people who share our own blood. And that's very much what's going on in this series on multiple levels. Now, this all begins, basically, we're following around the very sort of Cowboy Bebop-esque Roy Revant, who is a bounty hunter for all intents and purposes. He's actually employed and also serving as his landlady is his sister-in-law, Miranda. We find out that he lost his wife and daughter going back about 12 years before the start of the series to an event called the Blast Fall. This was this giant explosion, and there's a lot of scientific stuff going on surrounding it. It's a mystery to unfold throughout the course of the series, and it has to do with sort of this barrier in the heavens above the city that all of these people exist in. It's sort of a polar lights effect going on, and essentially as we begin, and he's chasing down a perp, Solty, the android gynoid main character of the series, very much literally comes crashing in on the scene, falling from the sky, and she's like a little lost puppy. She's very much tugging at Roy's pant leg and annoying him incessantly, following him home, and he's pushed to kind of sort of adopt her because there's no paperwork on her. And Miranda and her daughter, as it turns out, Kasha, as I say, his sister-in-law, she's very much about, we don't want to see this child become lost. They don't even realize at that point that she is sort of this supernormal being, this android or gynoid, and what that all entails. And so that's a large chunk of the charm of this series, seeing both Roy and Solty brought together and having their relationship tested when they're not even getting along to start with. And she very much becomes sort of a surrogate to the lost daughter that Roy has. He's still very much carrying a candle for his daughter. He doesn't believe that she's dead. He believes that she's out there somewhere in the world. And it's interesting how that plays out as the other characters in the story come together. It basically is peppered all throughout with all of these hints that are building up to this grand crescendo of truth to be revealed. And it's almost like gobsmacking to the point where you feel like you're watching a different series as these revelations are coming forth. And, twists and turns, lives being extinguished, people getting killed left and right, and characters you don't necessarily expect, are basically taken from us. The carpet being ripped right out from under them, and it's just absolutely grand in scale. Now, you also have characters like Rose, who is this self-professed and very chip on her shoulder, sort of character thief. And let's just say there's a lot to do with Roy's seeking out his daughter and this particular character, and I'll leave it there. You can pretty much assume what you will if you haven't seen the series, but she has two brothers, these guys Larry and Andy, who very much one of them always reminded me of kind of being like a Final Fantasy character in his look, the taller with the longer hair and the trench coat. The younger with the sort of spiky hair seemed to hail from like a Kingdom Hearts aesthetic, at least the way the characters are designed. And they're very supportive of her. They are thieves as well, and it all pertains to an underground where there's this whole sort of, the dregs of humanity have been cast out. People who don't have papers, and this is where that fear comes in that Solty may have been, sort of cast out as well because she doesn't have them, and that's why Roy has to adopt her. But you have this whole aspect of humanity who are downtrodden. They're in poverty, and you have this elitist sort of, upward world on the surface who doesn't really concern themselves with them. They are overseen by this entire sort of governmental framework and security force known as the RUC, and this is where some of the other main characters come into play. You have Integra, Sylvia, Celica, and Excella. And these four, it's interesting how they go from being sort of background characters who slowly come into focus, and then they become almost primary characters toward the end of the series. And a lot of the emotional rocking twists and turns going on is surrounding these four characters, and it's just mind-blowing. You also have comic relief characters like Yuto and sort of semi-dramatic a girl by the name of Jeremy, who's doing scientific experiments. She's actually had a history with the Yuto character, and she actually is responsible solely for creating a sort of Blastfall Mark II. And this completely undoes the foundations of everything that has been going on through the first half of the series, really. And then everything takes a turn in a much more dramatic way, building to that crescendo, as I say, of truth to be revealed. You also have characters like the very Morgan Freeman-esque Joseph, who has a history with the, for all intents and purposes, you get the sense very early on, so I don't think this is a spoiler, that this character Ashley Lynx, who works with the RUC and is kind of the boss of those four girls I mentioned earlier, that this guy is probably a villain. He's the most villain-like character, other than the bounties in the early portion of the series that Roy and Solty and his conglomerate go after. But it's very, as I say, just tantamount to a whole crap ton of revelations. Like, there are so many subtle hints in the early half of the series you don't necessarily see coming. And it's only after the awareness is sort of brought forth toward the second half of the series with these truths to be revealed that you start seeing where all of those aspects were coming into play in the story. And again, it's gobsmacking. You also have sort of smaller characters in the background that sometimes eclipse even the main characters. There's two in particular toward the end of the series. This guy by the name of Votra, who is a fruit vendor, and he's got this little girl who's coming and stealing fruit, and at one point when the Rose character has sort of begun questioning her thief status and trying to help the people of the underground, she gets this little girl arrested effectively, and this guy, this fruit vendor, feels for her. Come to find later in the series, they meet up again, this fruit vendor and this thief girl, when tragedy is ensuing the world over, or at least all across the city, for reasons that pertain to the core of the story and this Ashley Lynx character. And we see them form a bond. Very interestingly enough, he ends up adopting this little girl. And it's things like that. It's things with a very sort of emotional and conscientious heart that are fueling the course of this series and all of its plot aspects. Now, as I said, there are deaths and twists and turns that are unexpected all through the course of the series, especially relating to the RUC girls, who are also known as Proceed. They have these powers and abilities that pertain to the effects that happened after the blast fall, very in, sort of the genetic level. They've been changed fundamentally, everything from hair color to eye color, and these powers and abilities that are supernormal have been awakened in them. And you find that, this Ashley Lynx character, who is their boss, is looking for something. He's tried to awaken these abilities in them and progress them and further them, exploit them to an end by the end of the series. And it all sort of full circles with Solty becoming very much in the limelight once again. And she is, without wanting to give it away, the saving grace for not only the entirety of humanity in this environment, but she's also very much the saving grace on a soul level, on a compassion level for the characters of Roy and Rose and Miranda and her daughter Kasha and all of these other characters that surround her. She is sort of a beacon of light. She's very much sort of a Supergirl or Superman to this anime series environment, and she's very much beloved by the end because of that. All of these characters have their integral roles and become memorable for one reason or another, but at the sort of center is Solty herself. And I find it very interesting because something that Roy cherishes most is this song, which he plays on an old vinyl record player, which is actually what is where he takes the name Solty from. When he adopts Solty, she's known as something else, which pertains to her history, which is something that becomes revealed over the course of the story. But this particular record player is called Solty Rei. And that's where he takes the name, something he loved and cherished, that he actually called back to memories of his wife and daughter, whom, as I say, are lost. And he's seeking at least his daughter throughout the course of the series, and he finds by the end, because of Solty herself, more than he could have ever wished for, but not before almost losing it all. And that's what makes this series absolutely phenomenal. So I couldn't more highly recommend it. And I know it's, been out for a long time and you don't see people really talking about it that much anymore. And that's why I want to sort of put in my 2 cents. And in case you haven't seen it and you're following, my anime reviews, hopefully this will be a recommendation of something you can go check out. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the series, if you've seen it, or if you're going to be checking it out based on this recommendation. So that's pretty much all I have to say about the anime series Solty Rei. Just absolutely phenomenal, and in a save pack, very affordably priced if you want to just, get it all in one fell swoop. You can find it online, but the quality isn't always that great, and that's why I opt for owning it rather than, seeking it out streaming and downloading and such like that. But yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.